Here we are aboard the tugboat Leo, in the harbor of the city of Boston. The city of Boston is home to many historic monuments, like the Old North Church and the Bunker Hill Monument. But none intrigues me like the USS Constitution. Built as one of 6 original frigates for the U.S. Navy, the USS Constitution fought against the Barbary corsairs that it was intended for, and against enemies of its namesake. It also fought against the British Navy, the most powerful of its time. Little did I imagine that when I visited this ship today, I would find a weapon as powerful today as the one built so long ago.
My driving question for this project was, why do we keep the USS Constitution and maintain her in such a strict way? The answer that I found was, the USS Constitution has been kept and maintained today because the American public demands that it remains as a symbol of the beginning of our global might. The USS Constitution, a 44-gun frigate, captured and recaptured several prize ships prior to the First Barbary War. She captured numerous vessels of comparable size, most notably the HMS Guerriere. The HMS Guerriere's cannonballs were seen to bounce off the hull of the Constitution, giving her the famous nickname Old Ironsides. In 1815, the Constitution captured the HMS Cyane and the HMS Levant at the same time. In 1857, the Constitution became a training ship for the U.S. Naval Academy and retired from active service. In 1905, she became a barrack ship and remained in port until 1925. Instead of being decommissioned, she was restored to the tune of nearly $1 million. She then sailed around the country before being permanently docked in Boston Harbor. For her 200th anniversary, the Constitution sailed for the first time in almost 100 years. But what does it cost today to run the noble ship? When presenting this year's naval budget, Admiral Terry Blake found it very easy to justify having the USS Constitution, because the new aircraft carrier being made, the Gerald R. Ford, cost a whopping $13.5 billion, whereas the USS Constitution comes in at a $1.2 million budget for this year. Commander Matthew Bonner was born in Seaford, New York. He graduated from the Citadel in 1993. He was commissioned through the Naval ROTC program. Before he served on the Constitution, he served on the USS Normandy and USS Pensacola as navigator. He then served in the USS Nicholas and USS Lady Gulf as chief engineer. He volunteered and was accepted as commander of the USS Constitution as her 72nd commanding officer. I arranged a meeting with him to find out more about what the USS Constitution does today, why it's there, and who, whether a single person or a large group, were the patrons that kept the ship from the scrapyards.
I am now here with Commander Bonner, the 72nd Commanding Officer of the United States ship Constitution. Commander, is it on?
The Boston Light is the only manned lighthouse left in the country, thanks in part to the late Senator Ted Kennedy. Without him, the lighthouse probably would have been automated like the rest of the nation. Does the Constitution have any sort of patron, if you will, like Senator Ted Kennedy?
Well, Senator Kennedy was a patron of the ship for a long time, but I think the patron of the ship is the American public. Throughout the ship's history, when she's come close to being scrapped, the public is what's rallied around her.
Vice Admiral James Byrd wrote the orders for the USS Constitution. The Constitution is to remain in Boston as a museum, open to the public, and as a member of the Freedom Trail. The ship was also ordered to work with the Parks Service to provide an educational experience that teaches people the national and global significance of the USS Constitution. I wondered, though, why was the ship specifically placed back in Boston after sailing the world? After all, shouldn't the world's oldest commissioned warship be in the capital of Washington, D.C.?
So, Commander, how did the Constitution end up based back in Boston permanently?
Well, obviously she was built here in 1797 over at Ebonhart Shipyard, which is now the Coast Guard station in Boston. And she operated out of Boston for most of her active service. But, you know, after she came out of frontline service in the 1850s, she spent some time as a Naval Academy training ship. And actually during the Civil War she moved the Naval Academy up to Newport, Rhode Island, so she was based there kind of during the Civil War. They did a quick maintenance period on her in the late 1870s so that she could go over to the World's Fair in Paris in the early 1880s. But when she came back, she was moved up to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, where she served as a barracks and receiving ship. We refer to that as the ugly period in Constitution's history because she basically had a barn built over her, not very flattering to the ship. But in the late 1890s, Congressman Honey Fitz, JFK's grandfather, thought it would be a great idea to get the ship moved back to Boston for the 100th anniversary of her commissioning. And so she did, and she's remained here ever since. And in the 1950s, Congress passed a public law that decreed the ship would be kept in commission, not for active frontline service, and that her home port would be here in Boston. So like when the Naval Shipyard here in Boston closed in the 70s, the public law was modified that, this would be the national park, but they would have provided berth for Constitution, for her crew, and also for her maintenance facilities. So we've been here for 100 and something years now, and don't foresee us going anywhere else.
One of the few times that USS Constitution has left its dock has been this past summer to commemorate the War of 1812's bicentennial anniversary. I wondered what the commander thought about this event and what the fuss was all about.
Commander, would you mind telling us a little bit more about the bicentennial for the War of 1812?
Sure. Obviously, this year kicked off the start of the Navy's commemoration of the War of 1812. Obviously, everybody's focused on 2012 as kind of the big year, but in reality, it'd be kind of a 3-year celebration, much like the war was a three-year war. But 2012 has been great for us. We've taken part in 8 different Navy weeks, as I talked about earlier. We went places including Spokane, Washington, Phoenix, Arizona, New Orleans, New York, here in Boston, and even up to Buffalo, New York, and also Baltimore. But the big thing for us, obviously, was Boston Navy Week, or Harbor Fest here in Boston, and where we got to kind of be the center of this, having, I think, 15 ships here, including foreign tall ships and military ships, where we got to commemorate the War of 1812. And it was a fantastic week, a lot of different events, a lot of social engagements, but also a lot of community relations projects doing Habitat for Humanity, Caps for Kids. But I think personally for us, the highlight was on July 4th on our annual turnaround cruise. We got to do a couple different things. One, we had the Coast Guard tall ship Eagle sail with us, which really hadn't happened in recent memory. And then on the way back, as we passed the USS Wasp, kind of a big amphibious ship with what they had set up as a reviewing platform, with a lot of distinguished guests, including the Secretary of the Navy, we had the Blue Angels do a flyby. So in the picture, you have us, Eagle, the Wasp, and the Blue Angels flying overhead. So as I told people, I couldn't think of a better way to celebrate July 4th. In August, we got to commemorate the Postal Service launched a new Forever stamp that depicts an image of Constitution from an 1803 print. It's the second stamp in the last probably 70 years it's had Constitution as an image. And then the day after, on August 19th, we got underway and set sail for the first time, or second time in 131 years, but to commemorate the 200th anniversary of Constitution's defeat of HMS Guerriere, which was the first time an American frigate had defeated a British frigate equal size in a one-on-one battle. So it's been a great year. 2013 promises to be just as busy, maybe not quite as chaotic as 2012, but we're going to travel to a couple different cities in support of Navy Weeks. Obviously, we have Boston Harbor Fest here again this summer. And I would imagine there'll be some things for us next year in 2014, including maybe sending some sailors down to Fort McHenry for the 200th anniversary of the Star-Spangled Banner.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you to Commander Matthew Bonner.
My pleasure, thanks.
We are now sitting here with Miss Margarita Deasy of the Naval Heritage and Historical Command. Would you mind telling us a bit about yourself, Miss Deasy?
Sure. I currently work for the United States Navy as the historian with the Naval History and Heritage Command Detachment, Boston, and my job is to research USS Constitution.
I guess, Miss Deasy, what is the most interesting thing to you about the Constitution?
Wow, that's a great question. I've been connected with Constitution for about 15 years, and what I find amazing still is that after 15 years, when I go out and speak to a group, that no matter what that group's interest is, I might ask folks, so aside from Constitution, what else are you interested in? Someone might raise his hand and say, well, I'm interested in the Civil War, or I'm interested in general shipbuilding in New England, Well, obviously shipbuilding is an easy topic for me to relate to with Constitution because she's a wooden ship built here in Boston. But if someone were to say, well, I'm also interested in the American Civil War, well, USS Constitution has a connection to the American Civil War. She didn't go out and fight. She didn't sail the waters and patrol in any way. She was a stationary training ship for the United States Naval Academy when it moved from Annapolis, Maryland to Newport, Rhode Island for the duration of the war. But I can make that connection with the Civil War and with USS Constitution.
I started this project trying to see who or what caused the USS Constitution to stay maintained all these years. I found that no large organization or political groups give money so that the ship can be maintained from year to year. The USS Constitution has been kept around to remind us all of the turning point that is American naval might by citizens like you. The most famous citizen to do this is named Oliver Wendell Holmes.
I should let you go too. So in 1830, Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote a poem called Old Ironsides. And you should commit this to memory, Ralph, if you want to make real points with your
Old
words.
Ironsides by Oliver Wendell Holmes. Aye, tear her tattered ensign down, long has it waved on high, and many an eye has danced to see that banner in the sky. Beneath it rung the battle shout, and burst the cannon's roar. The meteor of ocean's air shall sweep the clouds no more. Her deck, once red with heroes' blood, where knelt the vanquished foe, where winds were hurrying o'er the flood, and waves were white below. No more shall feel the victor's tread, nor know the conquered knee. The harpies of the shore shall pluck the eagle of the sea. Oh, better that her shattered hulk should sink beneath the wave. Her thunders shook the mighty deep, and there should be her grave. Nail to the mast her holy flag, set every threadbare sail, and give her to the god of storms, the lightning and the gale.